This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, if you just want to click to the next slide, we have some upcoming events happening that we want to make everyone aware of. The next event is on September 15th. This is it's a commercial solar event. It's a partnership between CTEC Solar and the Connecticut Green Bank. We're going to talk about some new developments and strategies specifically for Connecticut, which is really exciting. And then on September 24th, we have John Macomber, who is the author of Healthy Buildings, How Indoor Spaces Drive Performance and Productivity. And if you haven't seen that book, it came out in April of this year and obviously was set to be released before COVID hit us, but it's super relevant right now. And it's a great read. So he co-authored that book. It's available through Harvard University Press, and I encourage you to go to bookshop.com and support your local bookstore and purchase it there. His co-author will be joining us on October 29th. They're both going to be keynotes at our annual Green Building Awards ceremony. This is kind of CTGBC's signature event. Normally we have it in person. It's a great evening, lots of cocktails and socializing and lots of fun. So we're trying to keep that same spirit up by going virtual this year. We have some surprises in store. It's not going to be your standard webinar. It will be engaging and hopefully a good time. So we're going to be giving out 14 awards that evening, and we'll have a great keynote by both of those co-authors. We encourage you, if you're not a member, to become a member of CTGBC. It's a relatively inexpensive membership at $50 for the year. It is a great way to stay connected with the industry in Connecticut and really get involved. Specifically, our advocacy committee, which Melissa chairs, has been really active this year. So that's a great committee to become involved in if you're interested. We're always looking for new people to come join us. We also have sponsorships available for all of these events that you see coming up. You can specifically sponsor a certain portion of the award ceremony or just sponsor CTGBC in general. Our executive director is Elisa Dolce, and her email address is just down there at the bottom. If you have any questions or want to reach out, she's a great resource. She's really easy to talk to and is super passionate about everything that we do. So I encourage you to reach out to her. Our NSBE Summit, Northeast Summit for a Sustainable Built Environment. This is a biannual event that Melissa and I co-chair. We've had 2 previous events. It's usually 2 days of networking and great sessions. We've had a health of place theme in the past and equity of place theme in past years, but this year we're really going to focus on climate justice and action. So again, this is usually a great in-person event, but we're moving virtual for next year. So look for that coming February or March of 2021. And that's another great way to get involved with our organization if you're interested in help planning that. So again, join us. We'd love to have you. I will be monitoring the chat, so use that for questions, and I'll throw it back to Melissa to get started on the presentation. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Nora. And so now we start our it's going to be very, it's a summary of just kind of at the high level. We're not going to get into a lot of detail, but if you do have a specific detailed question, please put it in the chat, and Nora will let me know if it's something that I can immediately address or if it's something that we can get to later on. But I do have I have all the specifics, and then also Larry is able to talk to any specific questions you have about actually doing it with your organization. So the JUST label, it's a social justice label for organizations, and it's administered by the International Living Future Institute, whose mission is to create a future that is socially just, culturally rich, and ecologically restorative. And it's not coincidence that socially just is really the first one there, even though they're known as an environmental organization. Really, they feel like true sustainability includes all of those things. It includes social justice. And we're not being true stewards if we're not including that in our priorities. So the International Living Future Institute really wants to address all scales of the built environment. So they have a number of programs. They're known for the Living Building Challenge, but they also have the Living Community Challenge, which addresses the community scale and neighborhood scale. Living Product Challenge for building materials. In addition, they also have like a zero carbon certification, which is just about, addressing, it could be a volume certification for a whole suite of building assets, or for just one building. There's also zero energy certification. And then there's kind of an in-between certification that they've created that allows a lot more people to engage with the standard without going full Living Building Challenge. So it's kind of above LEED Platinum. It's called the Core Green Building Standard Certification. Be like above LEED Platinum, but not Living Building Challenge. And then they also have a number of labels. They have a reveal label for energy in a building and a declare label for building materials. And those are all transparency labels. So we're going to talk about the JUST label. And it's really a transparency label. It is not, it does evaluate your performance on different metrics, but the only barrier to entry is really creating policies around these different metrics. So there's not, there's no minimum standard of compliance other than having a policy. So basically, the minimum standard is having a policy, and that's basically the 1-star level that you have that policy in place. And there are certain, you can opt out of some metrics, one per category, and certain things apply more to certain organizations than others. There are 6 different categories: diversity, inclusion, employee benefits, equity, stewardship, employee health, and purchasing and supply chain. And I also want to mention that in addition to being a social justice label that you're able to advertise and market, it also does provide you some benefit for applying for green building certifications. So for instance, there in the Living Building Challenge particularly, there is an imperative that basically is incorporates the JUST label. So if you wanted to get Living Building Challenge certified, you're required to have at least 2 project team organizations have a JUST label. In addition to that, they also require that either a certain percentage of your project teams or your contracting team is, a diverse, it incorporates diversity, or that you donate 0.1% of your project cost to a charitable organization. So that's how the JUST label helps you achieve Living Building Challenge. The WELL Building Standard also has a credit, or you can get 2 points for your organization having a JUST label. In addition, LEED also has a credit. I don't have it here, but they have the ability to get credits for having a JUST label. So there are lots of different benefits for going through this process. So what are the values? What are the actual the value of actually doing it? You're demonstrating your commitment to social justice. That, pure and simple. It's a third-party framework that you can use to evaluate your performance. It also kind of, once you go through it, you benchmark. It's basically a benchmark. And you see, oh, well, I performed really well in this category, but not so much in that one. Maybe I should focus on changing my my practices to score better in that metric. And then the other thing that's really important to note is that retaining employees, attracting employees, having this kind of label is something that at least tells them that you care about it and that you care about them. So some of this stuff I'm just going to read out. 72% of people globally say business is failing to take care of the planet and society as a whole, according to Accenture. Here are some, quotes from organizations that have gone through this program, where they really feel they understand the value of getting the label. Doing certain of the metrics actually have, actually all the metrics have quantifiable benefits to an organization. For instance, ethically diverse companies perform better than, and gender diverse companies perform better than a typical board. So if the typical board that consists of white men, which is, it's something that it's not just about perception, it's about actual performance of your organization. To have those different backgrounds and opinions and ideas on your board, you're serving your audience better. So here's another quote from an organization that has gotten the JUST label. And you can see some of the other benefits related to other metrics about higher productivity, sales, creativity. And we're going to go over some of these metrics in a little more detail later, but we're not going to get too in the weeds. So you can see how engaging with these metrics can actually help you retain employees, increase productivity, reduce turnover. And just having the label is you're communicating to people that this is what you care about. So we know that the younger generation cares a lot about this stuff. So when they're looking for work, they're looking for organizations that match their values and priorities. So that was talking about, I was done with talking about the values, and now I'm going to get into a little more detail about, and if there are any questions at this point, it's a little break before we get into the actual metrics or in more detail, but I'll just keep going if there aren't any questions. So the first category is diversity and inclusion. And the first two metrics are pretty standard. Ethnic diversity, they want to see, what's the percentage of different ethnicities that you employ versus, your regional percentages. But they want you to look at not just your overall workforce, but also leadership, so that you're looking at, you're making sure that leadership is also representative of your community. So the same thing with ethnic and gender diversity. Inclusion's a little more refined, that it's a little less immediate to understand what it means, but it's about making sure that people feel like they're valued and they can contribute and they can participate. Because sometimes there's this idea of like a token worker that meets a certain, category, but they're just there to do that, and people don't value them for what they bring to the organization. So it's not just about having that person there, it's about actually having them contribute and valuing their contribution. So there is a survey that you can give to your employees that if you score a certain way, you achieve different levels of performance. In addition, employee engagement is about how much employees feel passionate about the mission of the organization that they work for. So how much are they really excited about the work they're doing and that it matches their values and their principles. So there's also a survey that determines, you know, how these people, how much your workforce is actually engaged. So here are some statistics and some data around some of these things. You can see that in the entry levels, the workforce is pretty well demographically representative of the community, and this is in the US. And it's only actually 130 participating companies that actually had this data. So you can imagine that, you know, if you actually had, you know, a more representative sample, it'd be less inclusive. So what this really is showing is that at the entry level, things are copacetic, but then once you get into higher levels, there's less and less equitable representation. Sorry for that. So they've also shown that, you know, as we said before, more equitable representation actually has benefits. So female managers are shown to better engage with their employees, and women in leadership drive success. And we've also seen, you know, with COVID that women leaders tend to perform better with public health pandemics, at least. And it's important to note that 70% of US employees feel are not actively engaged in their jobs. So imagine if that number went up, how much productivity would go up, how much you know, happiness and satisfaction would go up for US corporations. So the next category is equity. Full-time employment is basically that, you know, you have a certain minimum percentage of people that are working full-time, and when they're working full-time, they get benefits associated with that, that you're not just hiring independent contractors, like, for instance, Uber or Lyft, or that you're actually engaging with your employees and providing them you know, meaningful employment. And the next metric is pay scale equity, and that's about understanding the difference between a typical worker salary and those in senior management, and that difference isn't drastic, that it's kept to a certain ratio. Freedom of association is about the ability of your employees to form unions, that they're able to form organizations and advocate for themselves adequately. A living wage, we know, is about paying people the minimum that someone would be able to actually afford to, you know, get housing, healthcare, nutrition, all those things. And that's determined by, there's an MIT living wage calculator for your area. And so, yeah, there's the different metrics are about how you compare to the living wage. And then gender pay equity is also self-explanatory, but it's not just about the same position, that you should be paying a woman and a man in the same position the same amount of money. It's actually organization-wide. You should be looking at, because that also kind of shows that if there is a large disparity, then it's possible that, you know, your female employees aren't getting the same opportunities to be promoted and to advance to higher paying positions. There are some, you know, exclusions for, you know, positions that, you know, have too few people to count. If you have more questions about that, feel free to ask. So here are some data and statistics around those metrics. Just to show the difference in income and the fact that, you know, we all know this, the top 1% their salary has increased quite a bit, whereas the bottom 90% has stayed pretty stagnant in relationship. So there's a disparity between the people that are actually benefiting from higher productivity or higher earnings and profit. And here you can see the actual ratio of CEOs versus a typical worker in US farms. And you can see that it's varied quite a bit and didn't start going up significantly until the 90s. So it's not something that's just baked into our society. It's something that's relatively recent phenomenon. And now you can see kind of the difference between the ratio of CEO to worker pay in the United States versus other countries, and the fact that we're an outlier, and it's, you know, we're not the usual. The CEOs in our country are very well paid. So it's kind of interesting to see some of these wealth distribution perceptions versus reality. To see that, you know, people realize that what they would like the distribution to be is not what it is. They know that it's worse, but they don't know exactly how much worse it actually is. The actual distribution of wealth is beyond, I think, people's comprehension. So here's a map that can show you the relative landmass of the United States if it were an indication of wealth. And it's quite startling to see that that red dot is basically what 40% of the United States owns in relationship to the full, in relationship to those that own a lot more. So this is just showing the difference in compensation by race, and you can see the big gap in the net worth of families. And so here are there are some statistics about the minimum wage. I think that there's a lot of misconception about who minimum wage workers are. I get this from my family members too. I mean, they all think that it's teenagers, that it's people that need to be incentivized to get more education and work a higher paying job, that otherwise these people are lazy, but the reality is that they're not teenagers. The average age of a minimum wage worker is 35 years old. They're mostly adults, and they mostly have their families and women with children, and they work full time. They're not 55% of them work full time, so it's not like they're just working this minimum wage job like on the weekends or when they're not in school. This is minimum wage is really the life, like the earnings, the home earnings for people, and this is why they should be getting a living wage, because they should be able to afford all the things that are necessary on this wage. So here's another distribution of minimum wage workers by age and by sex. So you can see that 33% of them, the largest piece of the pie, are women 25 and over. And, you know, only 10% of them are teenagers, basically, or male teenagers, 16. So 26% of them are basically teenagers. So that's a quarter, where most people think it's probably 3/4. And then also by education level, this is quite surprising to me, that you know, there's 31% of people have an associate degree, and then if you add it up, 12% of people either have a bachelor's degree, an associate degree, bachelor's degree, or master's degree. So only 28% of minimum wage workers did not graduate high school. So most people in minimum wage jobs have gotten some sort of degree, whether it's just a high school degree or an associate degree or master's degree. So if the minimum wage, and this was in 2011, was changed to $10.10, it would have pushed more than half of America's working poor out of poverty. So this is a really great leverage tool to solve poverty in this country. Moving on to the gender pay gap. This is a graphic to show how bad it is in various countries. You can see that actually, surprisingly, in Canada, it's not better than it is in the US. Canada outperforms us in a lot of different ways, but apparently not here. And Europe seems to perform pretty well in Australia. So this is from 2012, so it's a long time ago, but just showing that, you add on other factors, not just gender, you add the racial factor, that you get lower and lower comparative earnings to full-time white male workers. And then a really interesting thing is that just like being promoted to the next level of leadership, you can see that as women get older and more experienced, the gap between women and men gets wider and wider, where men who have the experience are, they're compensated for their experience and women aren't. And then the same thing goes for education. Women who get higher education are not compensated equally for their expertise than men are. So women, that's almost $500,000 they lose out because of this pay gap, which is quite significant. So moving on to the next category, are there any questions on that specific category that I can address quickly, or should I move on? All right, moving on. Employee health is about, the two metrics are physical health and well-being. And health is specifically about, there's a CDC model for developing a plan around addressing your employees' physical health, developing programs, or you can, get your building certified under Fitwel or Well, also qualifies for this metric. Well-being is about really supporting your employees' full well-being in terms of their full person, in terms of making sure that you have, gender-neutral bathrooms, you've got flexible work hours. There's a lot of different ways to earn this credit. In addition, you can earn it by having high employee engagement, or by being named a best workplace of the year or something in your area. Employee benefits, so this is the typical stuff we think about, having a health care plan, compensating and actually providing dental and vision, things that employers don't necessarily typically provide. Retirement provisions about 401k or IRA program where there's a minimum kind of default contribution, and then different levels are employee matches and that kind of thing. Family medical leave, this is a really important one. It actually at the 2-star level requires a minimum of 6 weeks of family leave for, a pregnancy, an illness or a bereavement, not bereavement, but caregiver time. So it's not, typically we've got 2 weeks or 1 week or 2 weeks. And the first level of achievement is 6 weeks. The fourth level is actually 24 weeks. So they really value this specific one. They value all of them, but I found that one to be pretty substantial. Training and education, that you have a minimum amount reserved per employee for them to go out and get trained. Different, amounts that are reserved, get different levels of performance. So to talk about the family leave in more detail and have some statistics around this one, I think we all know that we're really low performing in this area as a country. I mean, not even just among developing countries, like among all the countries, we're incredibly low performing. We have no paid maternal leave. So we do have family leave, which means that employees cannot be fired for taking time off, a certain amount of time off, but they're not compensated for it. So here is, you can actually see the number of weeks that other nations provide for paid maternity leave. And it's pretty startling. I mean, here you can see Canada's got 50 versus our 0. And that's just over the border. I mean, this is a real big issue. I know that it's probably a huge issue for women architects, which I am one of. I know that specific category just because that's my category. That 28%. We've got 28% of the workforce. So we've got 50% of the architecture students, but we currently only have 20% of the actual workforce. So you've got to think that there's part of that is not having paid maternity leave. So here you can see that some companies have stepped up. So they understand that being able to retain workers, which is the most important thing in, for instance, a very high-skilled job in Silicon Valley, that having paid maternity leave is key to attracting workers. So there are certain companies that do provide it because they recognize the benefit. So if these, big corporations can recognize the benefit of it, it's sad that people who don't work for these corporations don't also get that benefit. And you can also see the timeline of when these countries actually instituted paid maternity leave. It's, the UK did it in 1975. All these other countries did it even before then. So we're really we're behind the ball, and it's just kind of like, if all these other countries recognize that it's that valuable, then we need to be pressuring our leaders to provide this. So here's some information about our Family Medical Leave Act. A lot of people are eligible, but a lot of people don't even, they don't take advantage of it because they're not aware of it. And also they may feel that there's some sort of stigma if you do take advantage of it, or fear of losing their jobs. So next category is stewardship. The local communities metric is about understanding the community you're serving and engaging with stakeholders and understanding your own social impact. Community volunteering is straightforward. It's about providing paid time for your employees to volunteer in the community, and you score different performance values based on how much you do that. Animal welfare is about not condoning, brutality to animals, but it also has at different performance metrics that when you're getting catering, that you're providing a certain percentage of plant-based food, and then at the highest level, all plant-based food. Charitable giving is pretty self-explanatory. Depending on the level that you give to local charities, you score, different levels. And then positive products and service is the products and services you provide as an organization that they're certified to provide social and environmental benefit. So for product manufacturers, that would be having third-party certifications for your products, like GreenGuard or WaterSense or whatever, having those things. And then for architecture and engineers and service providers, it's about getting certifications for what we're designing. So we're getting, LEED Building Challenge, or that our work is third-party certified as having positive impact. And obviously, just to remind everybody, there's no barrier to entry. You don't actually have to perform well on these things. You just have to have a policy where you're committed to doing these things. So you might score 1 star just for having the policy, and then you can work your way up to perform better and better as you go. The next category, purchasing supply chain. Now these are everybody you're working with, the things you're purchasing, the supply, making sure that your supply chain has socially positive practices. So really evaluating the way that you interact with other organizations too. All right, well, that was all the metrics. You can engage more if you want to know how to actually achieve this. And I will take questions now.
Thank you, Melissa. That was great. We've had a couple of questions in the chat that we've been answering. I think if people want to continue to use the chat, that's fine. We can also probably have people unmute if they have a pressing question and have some discussion. I do want to give some time right now for Larry Jones to talk a little bit about his experience going through the process, and then we'll continue to do chat questions during that. And if we have a few minutes at the end, we can open it back up. Does that work?
Is Larry still here?
I am still here.
Great. All right, take it away.
All right. Hello, everybody. First off, I apologize for the disembodied voice, but I trust my phone more than my internet right now. So, as Nora mentioned, yes, I'm Larry Jones. I work for Atelier 10. I've been with the firm for about 13 years, and I'm an associate director. We have 3 offices in the U.S., New York being our first office, New Haven being the second, and then San Francisco being the third to open. And we've grown quite a bit since I started. When we started, it was around 8 to 12 people, and now we're closer to 75 to 80 since 2006 when I started. So we have had the Just label, or been Just certified, since around the time of its initiation, which I think was around 2015, 2016 or so. And so, disclosure, we're still certified under version 1 of the Just label. In 2019, they upped it to version 2, which are all the categories that Melissa took you through. So our expiration date is actually May of next year, so we'll be re-upping it and applying what we need to do with the additional categories, or because some were removed and the ones that you just heard about were some were added. For us, when I brought the idea to my co-directors about becoming Just Labeled, it was kind of a no-brainer. I think the nature of our firm, being environmental design consultants and just very open and starting as a smaller firm, branching off from London, we were a very flat organization. And as you folks know, as you grow, as much as flat as you want to be, you do start to have to go vertically as far as matriculation is involved and more people join. So, but be that as it may, that culture still remains. So when we decided to apply for the label, there were a lot of things that kind of fell into place naturally for us, which we were lucky about, again, just based on our culture and our ideals. Where things were slightly different, I think what it did for us was being a small firm, a lot of quote unquote policies were verbal, and the label helped us actually solidify those into actually hardcore policies that anybody in the firm can refer to when they have a question, whether it's with respect to maternity leave or paternity leave or sick time or volunteering in an outdoor or external organization as such. So we actually instituted a number of policies and ended up putting those into our intranet. And a lot of the things that we did create, policies that already existed, the label actually, just like any other benchmarking system, is very specific. And so there was a lot of discussion amongst ourselves of whether we wanted to go one way with the system or not, or continue in the way that we were going. And that kind of led to how our score laid out. The length of the process was I think we probably took about 8 to 9 months to go through. And, the first stop was really identifying what we have and how that matches with the system, and then identifying what we want to improve or institute because of the system. So in the end, we were very happy that we were able to, with diversity, we're very strong on. Equity, we're also very strong on, as well as our worker benefits. The previous category where employee benefits are under, it was previously called safety. And so there was talk about occupational safety and hazardous chemicals, so we scored very well on that as well. I think we were really shocked that we didn't score well on gender pay equity, given that my firm has more women than men overall. And even in our management, I think it's 55% to 45% women and men. So we were surprised by that. But again, it's with some intricacies in the system. And I think the last thing that I'll share with you is that we're an international firm, and we made a conscious decision because, we thought about doing this internationally. And what we wanted to do was, because the UK has very different rules with respect to employment, as does Australia, as does other offices, we strictly stuck with the US, our 3 offices in the US to get the label, all the while hoping that we can broaden this out to our other offices worldwide.
That's great. Thanks, Larry. So you just to clarify, you included New Haven, New York, and San Francisco, all 3 offices in your label.
Correct. New York being the mothership, and the other 2 being sub offices to New York.
Right. So to clarify, the ILFI does allow you to report on just one office of your company, if that's easier, so that larger corporations or people with a lot of remote offices don't have to include everyone, they can, but they don't have to. Have
Right.
you seen an impact, or what have you seen from clients coming to you saying, you know, we're pursuing living building, we need just labeled companies involved to meet some of the imperatives for Living Building Challenge? Have you seen any of that kind of direct traffic to you guys because of the Just label?
Good question. Yes, yes, it has. And I think it's even pushed further where we, you know, as a firm, we don't typically subcontract, but clients would ask us to search out other firms that may have a Just label as well to be on the team.
Okay, great.
One other point I guess I would say is the fact that we do have a California office. California labor laws are very different than those that we have on the East Coast and much more progressive. So there was also a lot of discussion in-house about the balance of that, where those California labor laws fall well into the higher levels of the Just label for certain categories, where the rest of the company isn't quite there. And so where I think if we all followed the California labor laws, we probably would have scored higher on certain categories, when we kind of fell somewhere in the middle because our East Coast offices do not have that.
Very good point. Very interesting. Okay, do we have any other questions from anybody at this point? All right, I don't see any other questions coming in. I do, Larry, thank you very much for sharing your experience with us, and of course for your sponsorship of this event. It is very much appreciated. Melissa, thank you for an excellent presentation as usual, and lots of great content. The link to the Living Future website is included in the chat. You'll find the entire Just label manual is free and available for anyone to use. So I encourage you to check that out. It really goes into a lot of detail on all of the requirements. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out to Melissa, myself, or Alicia, and we'll point you in the right direction. Melissa, do you have anything else you want to share?
No, I think it's good to end early on a Thursday afternoon.
A beautiful Thursday afternoon.
It is a beautiful
All right.
Thursday afternoon.
Enjoy the extra 6 minutes to your day, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Nora.
All right. Take care.